Hi everyone, thanks for joining us this evening for International Women's Day discussion. I'm Harshita from WomenInPharma ISP Singapore. Today's discussion will be aligned with this year's theme of Choose to Challenge, and our panel speakers will be sharing their experiences and thoughts on it. We encourage all of you to actively participate in discussion by sharing and asking questions along the way. You can either use the chat function, the reaction function at the bottom, or just unmute yourself anytime to ask the question. Also, this is a disclaimer. We all agree that panelists and all who participate speak off the record from their personal experiences and not in any way from the companies unless specified otherwise. The session is recorded, but it will not be circulated unless consent is given. I would also like to invite all of you to answer the poll questions that you see on your screen. The discussion will be led by Julia Gandhi, who's the chair of Women in Pharma ISP Singapore, and also the moderator for today's discussion. I would like to welcome our panelist, Preeti Kachru, who is a Global Affairs Principal Scientist at GSK Consumer Healthcare, Eileen Koch, who is the Director of Enterprise Regulatory Compliance at Johnson & Johnson, Stephanie Donat, who is the Head of MS&T at Novartis, and Pierre, who is the CEO of No Deviation. Julia, I will now pass the time over to you.
Hello, everyone. Hope you've answered the poll questions. And Christine, is that closed already? Oh, you're going to close? Are we waiting for more responders?
So I have closed the poll already.
Right. Okay. Okay, I'll go on already with the discussion, and we'll come back to this a bit later. All right. Thanks, Harshita, for introducing all of us. Panelists, thanks so much for sharing your time and experience for our Women in Pharma discussion. A reminder to all of us is that the topic for today is creating opportunities for women in the pharma industry. Just to put the role of women in the healthcare sector in perspective, I would like to share a few statistics to set the background for our discussion that follows. Now, we noticed or seen that in two of our recent studies, healthcare seems to be one of the industries that employs a number of women. Now, just to clarify, healthcare includes companies that manufacture drugs and medical devices and service providers. So it is also good to see that women hold high positions at the highest levels, actually, in some of the companies, and one of them being Emma Walmsley, the CEO of GSK. Now, looking at the next slide, we see that there is a very good representation at all levels, starting with the entry level, where there's more than 60% of healthcare workers as compared to the other industries. So you see that entry level, at managerial level, senior manager, vice president, and so on. And you see that this is the healthcare industry versus the other industries. So they more or less remain the same. But interesting is the next slide, where we see that looks good, but is that a reason to celebrate? Maybe or maybe not. Because here you see that the share of women declines as they climb up the ladder or they go into senior roles or senior management. So you see the decrease there. And I must say that this is not just in the pharma industry, it's also in other industries. So here you see the men in healthcare in dark, and then you see the women in healthcare. Now, the large numbers are, of course, representing the women in that particular level. And the last slide is interesting for us because it is the next slide. it is interesting for us because it's about leadership roles in pharma. And here you see the stats for the top 10 pharmaceutical companies. And what you notice is that only 25% of leadership teams have women in it, and there is still only one female CEO among the top 10 pharmaceuticals. With that, we have another poll being put up. This is on hiring at the entry level. So the poll will say, how can companies improve hiring practices? Can everybody please attempt the question? How can companies improve hiring practices? You can select the top 3 in your mind, or what you think can be done to improve hiring practices. We'll be using this question to continue the discussion on hiring and hiring practices. Okay, interesting. Involve more people in the interview and track equality. All right. Interesting. And I'm going to ask Pierre to comment on the poll results. Pierre?
Yep. So thank you for letting me in this meeting. For once, I'm the only guy on the panel, which is good. So no, like for the hiring practices, I'm surprised to see the track of equality and diversity in the workplace. No, we do track it in our company, but I'm always very careful when we put KPI because sometimes they induce the wrong behavior. So I will rather tackle it proactively than just tracking and adjusting. I think it's important to review it, but I wouldn't track it actively the way we do our recruitment. For me, what is really important and what we try to do, and I think help a lot, is to involve more people in the screening and in the interview, right? So that you don't create bias over there. It's something which is, I think in Europe, they tend to have no picture, no, you don't mention the gender on the CV, and you do all of those so that you purely look at the technical. Whether I find that since I'm recruiting in Asia, it seems to be a bit different, where the race, the gender, the picture, all those things are on the CV. Whether in Europe we try to have those CV a little bit more vanilla in terms of the background to really focus on the professional experience. So in my view, I would say, well, the bullet disappeared, but I would say for me the neutral job description, right? It's the first step. If you start to put things that speaking Chinese is a must, or need to be able to carry a heavy weight and things like that, those are things that are generally used to a certain discrimination, and that we try to avoid. Those are things that you can always take as part of the job interview if it's really mandatory and other. So I think it's very difficult because the way we are trained and formatted to write our CV and present ourselves is already biased from the beginning. The way we put the job advert, or where we put the job advert, or even the where people are going to read it and who get the diploma is already biased. So I find it it's a conscious effort not to be biased in hiring, and it doesn't happen randomly, right? So I don't know. I don't know what are the other panelists' experience in that. But for me, we really had to not only review the KPI, but we had to stop, think, and review what we are doing to make sure we don't by default fall back in a bias or another. And everybody have its own bias, right? That's why I think having many people in the panel help to, have a fair recruitment.
Would anybody like to add on?
Thanks.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
No, just a quick one. It's like I echo Pierre in terms of like how we choose a panel for interview. I think is a very important moment, meaning that to have like a bigger panel with more diversity help also to deconstruct like some bias that we can have during the selection. Thank you, Preeti.
Yeah. Just one more build. We saw from the poll, the another strong point that was coming was about the unconscious bias of the recruitment panel, right? So when we look into the recruitment process, I think this is pretty much my personal opinion that we should try to target various communities to encourage the applications which are coming from a diverse group. And the understanding of hiring managers, how much they have the understanding of IND, which means inclusion and diversity, and how much in terms of it is part of their business KPI, whether it is measurable. So when they are doing this hiring practices as hiring managers, that they are keeping this in view and creating an equity of opportunity. So I'm going to use this tagline a lot today, equity of opportunity for all.
Thank you. Thanks, Preeti. Now that we have an understanding of the hiring process or what changes could be done, what happens after they join? They join, that's the entry level. And then, of course, everybody has ambitions and would like to do well in their jobs. So what do you think companies can do to achieve some kind of equal access to promotion and benefits? And here you can also, I think we have Stephanie. Stephanie, you're going to comment on this and maybe give some of your experience.
Yes, and thank you, Julia. And I would like maybe to talk about my personal experience here as a woman. So I think like as most of the women like having like an idea of career, but it's pretty, I would say, unclear when we start. So we apply, we get a job, and we start. And I think like now, first of all, more and more our study time is getting longer. And I think for me, it's like a very key element when we talk about creating equity of opportunity for women. Because like if we do like longer studies, but as a woman, of course, like we aspire to have a family. And I think like one of the key elements that for me helped me in my career is that I had the chance to be in companies where they were doing the identification of talent early. I mean that if we start to identify talent when they are past 30s, then we create again this balance. So I think that to be proactively look at talent before the 30s is already something important if we want to promote also women in terms of like access to the opportunities. So I think that for me, it was like the first key element. I was like lucky to have this experience and also to have, I would say, some like women who are more experienced, who are eager to share. I think I have like very like strong figure also who help me and advise me, and I would say preempt me on some aspect that you don't think about when you just join the workforce. And so it's very helpful to have, I would say, this woman willing to or mentor or share their experience. I think that this was the two first elements. Then I think that there is something that is starting to come more and more, and I think is very key. Is about the maternity leave and the paternity leave. So more and more companies now are extending the paternity leave in the same way as maternity. And I see this as a really strong sign that we want to create the same gender balance. I think that for me, there's like these three elements are very important in terms of like how we can create this equity. But like maybe let me ask like to the other panelists, like what do you think for this aspect?
Anybody would like to take that on?
Yeah, so thanks, Stephanie. I think it's a very important point that you have raised. So I will build the 2 pointers to that. So first of all, for me, I think the very first basic step is that we all take the responsibility for our thoughts and actions. That means when we are talking about this opportunity, we have to own this. So it's irrespective of gender, we all have to own this. And coming back to how to create this opportunity within the system or within the organization, I think the aim should be to build that capability and skills not only at the organization level, but also at the people level. This opportunity has to be from the very basic level. And every company, even if they are on very different journeys on the same, but laying the foundation should be mandatory to create such kind of opportunities.
Okay, Pierre, you wanted to say something.
Well, I didn't took any paternity leave, so I'm guilty here, right? But no, that I agree. The paternity leave is something that is still we don't have many application in from what I see. It really and then there is a paternity leave, but there is also the expectation that the mother is going to take leave, right? And you know, and the paternity leave is kind of a bonus that we give to the dad so he can, you know, it's not too far, the way I see it, right? It's not something that, it's not normal for a mother to say, no, I'm going to go back to work and I'm not taking my leave because I'm happy, you know, with my job and things. It is expected that the mother will take all her maternity leave and then we give something to the dad.
Yeah.
If you were I was in Hungary and I work over there, and there the maternity leave is 2 years. So when you get a baby, you get away for 2 years, yeah, and you guarantee your job back and things like that. But you know, and so you can really see that wherever you work, but there is no paternity leave over there. So it's really, I think it's not only the company, it's the culture as well, which is really different. And I do agree that the paternity leave should be almost forced to the dad at some point. That is not to go PlayStation, you know, it's really to support and to create a bond with the child, because I think one of the reasons the mother is always busy with the child is because she takes the leave, she creates that bond, and then from there it's biased, right? Because the dad continues to work, so of course the mother is more linked. I really start to bond with my kids the day that my wife stayed in Singapore working and I had to fly back in Europe with the 2 daughters, 3 months and 1 year old. And that's where I start to realize that, you know, I was really a dad. So I think the dad don't realize the importance of taking leave to bond with their child, and then that will slowly change the bias.
Thanks, Pierre. I think this is something that is of interest to everybody, and I'd like to know if the audience would like to ask any questions. Please put your questions down in the chat, and we will take those later. Right through the whole discussion today, and if you have any question, whether exactly according to the topics we're discussing or if it's anything else, please put them down. Thank you. With that, we are going to talk about, this is more about after they are in and they have some benefits. See, all companies give benefits, but sometimes, like Pierre says, that there has to be a balance between what they really want, or according to the culture of the organization, culture of the place they're in. And after that, is there anything else that helps what we say equal opportunity? And for that, we're going to have another poll just now. Everybody, please participate in this one. It's a question: how important is work culture in achieving equal opportunity? Please answer the question, and we will comment on the poll results. Again, the question is, how important is work culture in achieving equal opportunities? And I think what you can also include here is communication. That's what we mean is the role of work culture in also communicating what is good. Now, this is all right, very important. And with this, I'd like to ask Elin to comment on this and to talk again about work culture.
Thank you very much. We heard from a lot of speakers whereby they talked about the importance of non-bias. And for this, the company culture is very good because it's very important, and communication is one thing. On top of it is that we have the males and the females, but as we can see, we also have to be self-aware. What are our weaknesses? What are our strengths? And we communicate. And if we got male supporters or female supporters in the community, that's where we can grow up together and work together. So this is very important, where we see that the work culture is very good for achieving equal opportunity. Like in Johnson & Johnson, we have a diversity and inclusion. But the very important word is that talent is never gender specific. So self-actualization, whatever you have in your mind, whatever thoughts or aims that you have, actualize it. Thanks, Julia.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Any of the other panelists who'd like to add on here on work culture and how important it is? Like you also saw what the audience mentioned, that of course it is very, very important. So is there anything else any of the panelists would like to add on here? Stephanie? And
so maybe one quick one when we say work culture, right? Especially in big company, too many times those are posters on the wall, right? We try to create a culture. It's like the safety culture, it's like the quality mindset. I think the inclusion culture is something that need to be top down, but you need to have the right to speak up. And it goes all the way to people putting comment in the canteen or saying like he did his job like a girl or some things like that. And you hear that, right? You hear it a lot. And for me, that's why you need to stand up. You need to have the right to say, no, you don't say that, right? For me, that's where the bias starts. And because you say that as a joke or, so it keeps in the culture, right? And that's why it's the same thing as not putting your safety boot when you go on site. You do it once, you do it twice, and then it becomes the norm. So when you hear things like that, I think that's where we need to speak up. And we don't, because we feel we are overreacting, right? But it's really where the problem root, right? Is in those kind of sentence that we all heard from our father or male colleague and things like that, and we repeat without thinking, and then slowly they become the norm. And I think we need to act on those if we want to have a culture in the company.
absolutely, Pierre. Thanks. Stephanie, you want to add on?
Yes, just one add-on. I think it's culture of the company is very important. This definitely like the work culture and like how everyone stands, as you mentioned, Pierre. I think also which is important is that as a person, also how we place ourselves, as like Lynn, you mentioned, I see we need also to actualize here also. I mean that to ensure that also when we speak up or when like we are in a meeting, we talk as a human being, not as a woman. So I think it's also important sometimes to really like set this like on standard ourselves and not have a potential frame about how we might be perceived. So I think this is also one element that we need to be like self-aware.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think I just want to build on what Stephanie mentioned. I think as long as each individual, puts in an effort to identify their blind spots and work towards self-awareness and self-reflection journey, I think it mutually creates that culture, that inclusion culture, where we not only respect each other, we build in better relationships and build in trust in every relationship. And once this step happens, I think there is this major shift, that step change for the culture that we are looking forward for. That is a more inclusive culture in any organization.
Okay, thanks, Preeti. We have a question from, and I'd like to read it out. There are two questions here, one on the hiring process And I think I'll take that, and then I'll take Jeff's question later. This is from Aruchidar Silva Kumar, and he says this is about hiring process. Name and gender should not be included in screening. Pierre, would you like to comment on that? In the chat, there's a question.
Yeah, well, I agree with it, right? We are not hiring a person for his name or his gender, so why would we put it in the CV? But then it's always in the CV, right? And again, if I start to give number to all the people who apply, sometimes it's painful as well to review, and then but no, I agree. Name and gender, to a certain extent, the age to I want a senior engineer. I want a senior engineer, right? So I don't care whether it's like 50-year-old lady or a 30-year-old guy, like I'm going to do the interview process. So yes, I think it should, and you see that there's big debate about it in France and Belgium where I work, whether here it's not even mentioned, right? If people don't put their race on the CV, we find it weird, right?
Yes, true. Okay, the next question is from Jeff. Question for the panelists. We have many speakers with international experience on the panel. How would you view Singapore specifically when it comes to equality? What is Singapore doing well or could improve on? Who'd like to start? Panelists. Pierre, you're already there. You want to continue?
Being in a panel talking about, women's rights and equality, I feel like I'm walking on eggs. So if I need to put comment on Singapore, not being from here, just now I'll put it, right? But we put it under quote, and it's my personal view, so don't put it on Facebook or anything. I think Singapore is doing a fantastic job in terms of putting the enabler. No deviation was. We signed the TAFEP, which I think is a fair employment regardless. So there is a lot of enabler for Singapore to become more mature in the field. I do still feel, and we are an employment agency, so we have client requests who come to us and they want to hire people and project hiring people and say, and I can tell you in the fact, there is a huge bias in terms of race and sex and things like that. I would say if there are things I wouldn't even dare to say in public of the requests we receive, right, from MNC in Singapore in general. So, there is hope for the future, but we're not there yet, right?
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah. This is Lynn. What we can do is that because I travel quite a lot and I do compare internationally with Europe, America, and also Asia Pac, Singapore is doing relatively well to some of the countries in Asia Pac, but we are not as good as America as we are because there is still a sort of a gender bias. But I think it's the way that we don't carry ourselves forward. If we are able to communicate well and present ourselves well, it's something that will stand us in good stead. But we are doing much better than some countries because in Asia Pac, we do have some countries which are gender biased. But in Singapore, it's relatively well, but we can still improve just a bit more.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Is that one of the reasons we do see a larger number, I think, of women in high positions, not just pharma, but other industries also in Singapore? I think we do have a higher proportion compared to maybe our neighbors or other countries in Asia. Okay, we have another question. Jeff, comment about what I've found in CVs in Singapore when it comes to hiring compared to the US. I see much more personal information in Asia than US. For example, photos are very popular here, where it would not be considered professional to do in the US. That's interesting. Jeff. And I think Lynn just mentioned how it's so different between what is expected in the US or practiced in the US as against being practiced in Singapore. Yes, that's true. Anybody wants to, Lynn, you want to say anything?
I think this is very true. In Asia Pac, we do sometimes include the photos, but in the US, it's just probably the name, and we don't have the gender, we don't have even the age group. So there is no bias in it. But the thing is that maybe it's a different countries, they do have specific requirements, but in the States, it's everything is, you don't know many things, but it's only probably the name that you know, because they have to know who's on the CV. But whether you're the gender, what age you are, they don't mention it. But in some countries, they do require maybe the photograph. And I think that creates a small gender bias because they can see from your face whether you are female or how old you are.
True. Thanks, Lynn, for that. We will move on to equal opportunities. And this time what we're looking at is, we've mentioned some barriers. What are the other barriers that kind of don't help equal opportunity in today's workplace? And if there are any obstacles when it comes to advancement. And as we saw earlier, it is evident that as women move up the ranks, things don't go as well. So let's have Priti, would you, before Priti starts, we're going to have a word cloud poll. So on what are the other barriers to equal opportunity in today's workplace? For this, you'll have to look at your screen and do what Christina tells us to do. Christina,
Okay.
you wanted to...
Yeah, so I sent the link to menti.com in the chat, as well as a QR code if you want to scan it with your handphone.
Okay.
And I will share my screen, and let's see which words you will put in.
Okay.
Okay, can you all see my screen? There we go.
Politics, cultural upbringing, management, bias, mobility. Okay. Travel, education, management. All right. Upbringing. That's interesting. Age, yes, that's always there. Maternity, cultural. Mm-hmm. That's Preeti, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, Julia.
Okay. You want to pick some of these words and
Yes, sure.
include it in what you are going to comment on? I
Yeah,
thought
thank
this
you
was
so much.
something interesting, like
Yeah,
overqualification. And oh,
yeah.
okay, you pick what you'd like.
Yes, it's pretty interesting, Julia. As you can see, there are different factors, if you see, which are kind of roadblocks or challenges that we can, gather from this word cloud that was initiated. I'm just picking up the one which looks like a big number having to it, which is mobility. And when we look from the lens of women, so we go for balancing family needs and careers. So I'm not just saying that it is only limited to this gender, but primarily when we see from the Asia lens, it is more about balancing family needs and careers. And at some point of time, everyone has faced a family situation in terms of taking these key decisions in life, which are the leadership decisions, where the mobility of that stakeholder really becomes a roadblock, or I should say barrier for their success in their developmental journey. And just sharing from my own personal experience, from the mobility point of view, I have been pretty lucky in my family, because for my own career I was able to move, and my husband was able to move with me to the different positions or the different countries that I was aiming for. But I have a very good circle of friends who share a similar story of the challenges they have faced, either because they have been dovetailing to where their husbands are moving with their jobs and they are losing their key positions, or the mobility has been a hindrance due to their family factors. So I feel, yes, mobility is one, or the travel is one of the factors from the family responsibility. There is another phase to the same, is travel related to your work oriented task. So again, mobility due to the family can be a constraint, or maybe other responsibilities can be a constraint, because you're not able to take up those positions, or maybe not take up to those tasks to deliver when we think from the mobility perspective. So it is pretty much binded as it is coming out. So I will just let other speakers to pick up the different pointers which are very realistic in terms of what challenges are faced by the child.
Okay, anybody else who'd like to take my screen? 1 minute. Okay, Stephanie, would you like to comment?
I'm just thinking about, like, when I see the words there, like which one is equal to me, and I think it's maybe age. But on this one, I would say is also like a difficult one, because there is this unconscious bias, and I think that's we the way to like outcome this barrier is the same way than like the one like about the bias that can have the gender bias. I think is the only way somehow, and like to work on our way to place ourselves, and then how we also remind ourselves like how we are behaving around people who have, like, I would say, different generation, because it can go like both way. So on this one, I think this is the one with me like echoes the most, maybe because like just to share how I was like I started as a manager very young, and my team was like age of like my parents. So it was like I was lucky, to be honest, like the experience went well, but it's a difficult one, because it's always obvious. It's very, very obvious. So this, I think we really have to remind ourselves. And for my hand now, like at that, growing older, I have to like put me back in the shoes of like the young lady I was at 23 years old, to say like, Steph, don't do this. So I think it's really like also how we keep practicing the self-reflection. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Thanks a lot. I'd also like to ask you here, since we're talking about maybe barriers or what can change, and I see over here education as a one other probably important factor, and also see a few others related to it, like overqualification, and it comes up in other tabs too. So what do you think that means, education? Now in Singapore, we have people, as you know, coming from different countries. So how do you look at that, Stephanie?
I mean, it depends like how this is positioned, because it's like access to education, or is it like how we promote people based on like which degrees they have. And I've seen different pattern in different, I would say, country or different company. Personally, I mean, I think like the first one, the access to education, this is very like, I would say, like political and country specific. So then when it come about promotion, once we are already like in the work environment, and this I will talk on to my name. I tend to believe in also like how after a while the talent of the person or like the capability of the person is not anymore reflecting about the degree. So I think that the degree is like a background that we put at the beginning, and that's we use a certain percentage, is like an enabler. But is it the, I would say, the path for promotion? I don't think so. I think that is not always for me like the best way to identify like next promotion or next talent. Yeah. But again, that is I know that like this is really different view can apply. This is always like a very active discussion, I think. And I would be interested to hear also about like other opinion on this. Yeah.
Yep, sure. All right. Anybody else would like to comment on this? I was reading that in some countries, and maybe in countries like Hungary, which Pierre mentioned, where there is a long maternity leave, there are some companies that have what they call a re-entry program, that is after maternity. And sometimes post extended break, maybe people take for some reason, either a sabbatical or take time off, maybe for kids or other reasons. And they have programs to reconnect them. Is that common in the industry? I'm just thinking about the pharma industry here, of course. Is that common to have or not at all? A program to kind of bring them back into the workplace, schedules, how if there are, especially if there are changes during the time they were not there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it goes with the education, right? Like you say, when you go on leave for whatever reason, right? You have a baby, you have a car accident, the world doesn't stop, and surely the company doesn't stop. The commitment to the company to stick to their employee, when I joined GSK, when I first started working, in Belgium, when you join GSK, you have a job for life, right? You join GSK, that's it. You see your career path and all the way to the retirement. In Singapore, it's not at all like that, right? In Singapore, you will change job and company every 2 years. So the mobility, and there is a mobility, and the mobility between different companies here is extremely, you switch, and it's fantastic, because I learned so much working for other companies than GSK. So I think it's, there is pros and cons. The fact that in Singapore, everybody is into us, so I can work for AbbVie or GSK or MSD, and I take the same bus. You try to do that in the US, you have to move the whole family from one state to the other, right? So definitely there is pros and cons, but then company might be more reluctant to invest in you if you're going to leave, right? But then if the one you don't invest stay with you, what are you winning at the end? So I think, again, Singapore is giving a lot of enabler there from the government, right? There is a lot of class that are available. There is a lot of things that are available on the market. And I was giving class on, process validation for people who want to enter in the pharma and come from another QA/QC background, but there is a lot of similitude that they could apply over there. I think, again, both the access to education at all age and all point in your life, regardless whether you stop working or you move with your family because one of them is moving in Singapore, and you need to let go what you had to follow the one that can come here. It's something which is important, and it's something that mentorship is very, very important. I believe if you can, share your worries and question, and if someone will help you in what could be a moment of distress in your professional life, will go a long way.
Yeah, thanks, Pierre. There's an interesting question here from Wei Yin, which says, what would you say are some strengths that you've observed females bring to the table as leaders? What would you say are some strengths that you've observed females bring to the table as leaders, which obviously means something special? Anybody wants to venture? This is a question from the participants.
Well, they bring diversity, right? That's why we need to have that. We need to have different perspective. Like if we want to solve all the problem in the world, we need to have all perspective on the problem. So I think the first thing a woman or any other type of person bring to the table, which thinks differently than us, would be challenging, but should be challenging, and that's what they bring.
Yeah, true. Totally agreed. For example, take this particular panel. Having Pierre here makes a big difference to all of us, right? It brings in a different perspective. So thanks for that question, Wayne. We have a question from Henry, and he says, besides gender equality, many jobs in Singapore also ask for nationality. If you do not currently have a Singapore visa, no way to work there. I think this is a bias. Okay, you may.
It's the same in every country, right? That's why visa exists, right? So I don't think it's Singapore. And I think Singapore is doing a good job at keeping everybody happy, especially the ones that are in Singapore, right? If you go in Europe, it's the same, right? If you are European, you can work in Europe. It's quite easy. But even there, we start to put control and things like that. So I would say, like, there is two things here, right? If it's nationality, pure nationality, and you need to apply for a visa, then it should be, I leave Singapore to make the choice. But the fact that you don't have an employment pass or you need to apply in Singapore, I think it's not a bias. It's Singapore trying to control the demand, and we saw it recently with the COVID, where having an employment pass or S-pass is getting more and more complicated because we want to keep the economy moving. So I'm not sure that really goes in the bias of, like, if we had like more EP for men than women, that's a bias. Right?
That's a bias, yes, true. Totally.
And I think I just want to add up to what Pierre mentioned. Exactly, I think it doesn't fit into the zone of bias. It's pretty much very similar in most of the countries, and again, very country-specific guidelines for hiring practices in each of the countries.
Yeah, and I think we can just say that there are different practices in different countries, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bias, I think, anyway.
And again, Singapore is quite transparent, right? To a certain extent, right? You go to the MOM and you have all the rules of what you need to do and things like that. I think bias is it's really bad when you don't know the rules, right? When you don't know why you are put aside. When if you're a woman and you constantly put aside and nobody tell you, because you're a woman, how can you get better at being a woman? You know what I mean? So for me, that's it is important to be extremely transparent to avoid bias, because if you are not transparent in your choice, then there is no improvement possible.
Thanks, Pierre. We have some time for Q&A. If any more questions, please put them in. And in the meantime, I was going to ask the panel to think about this particular question. How would you inspire a new generation of women in pharma? Now, we have a little time, so I would say, can each of you give like not just a phrase, but maybe a minute? We have 5 minutes more. So can you just say what's on the top of your mind, or just give a phrase? It's okay, either way. And keep the questions coming, participants, please, all those of you who are listening. All right, who's going to start? Then you.
Julia, I can start. Yeah, this is Preeti. I can start.
Okay.
So the thing that comes on the top of my mind is pretty much aligned to what, when we think about the International Women's Day, that means choose to challenge. It's pretty much the kind of tagline that, goes in my mind and looks like sums up from today's discussion as well, is don't stop challenging yourself and don't limit yourself with the limitations. And what it exactly means is challenges will be there, and it's not a very gender specific challenges. Challenges are there in the workplace, in your personal life. You're doing a very good balance. Let the challenges come and don't limit yourself from the kind of limitations that you have set for yourself. It may be the limitation that you have in your mind. It may be the limitation that you think there is. So think, reflect, be self-aware, and don't limit yourself from limitations.
That's good advice. Any more wisdom? Lynn, you had earlier wanted to speak.
Yeah. I think like what Preeti is saying is that challenge yourself. But for me, I would say that learn from the best. Observe who is good in their job, and also never be scared to learn. Keep learning and never stop learning, because life is never to stop at learning. Just be yourself, challenge yourself, and also learn from the best.
Thank you. Thanks, Lynn. Stephanie?
I think me, like, the advice I will give is like on your path and help yourself. And this is like really coming from my own journey, is that sometimes even your closer ones, they don't give you the best advice for different reasons on your path. I mean, like at the end of the day, it's your journey. And I think this is really important.
Thanks. Pierre, your turn.
Well, again, I'd be careful giving advice here, but for me, the most important is just there, right? Dare to do it. If you think you have the right to do it, well, even if you're wrong, you have the right to be wrong. Yeah. So just dare to do it, and if it doesn't work, find a person that you trust that can tell you whether you were right or wrong. But don't take it for, don't let people put you down. Just go for it.
Oh, great. Thanks. Thanks for all the words of wisdom, guys. And I'd like to quickly again ask if there are any questions. We still have a couple of minutes, unless we are close, unless there's something wrong with my watch. But anybody?
Well, I just again, my personal experience, try to educate myself on the woman's condition, right? Because I don't even understand. I cannot start to understand what a woman has to go through. So I put in the chat a book that I recently read about a woman in Korea that had more or less my age. She's born in 82, right? And there is one sentence that catch my attention in the book, and to show you the difference between enabler and change of behavior, is they say that this was a time when the government, so it's in Korea, in the late 80s, early 90s, had implemented birth control policy called family planning, right? Abortion due to medical problem had been legal for 10 years, and checking the sex of the fetus and aborting female was a common practice, because having a daughter was a medical condition. So that's already like, I had no idea, right? And I'm not pointing finger. I just say it's a fact. It was like that. What struck me in the book is that after that, the heroine of the book went alone. So the husband, the family, they don't even see that as a problem that she had to abort her child because it's a daughter, right? And she can go alone and face that alone. And I don't know if it was the fact that she would ever do it, or the fact that she had to do it alone, that for me, it was a wake-up call, right? So I think that book gave, a bit of, for the guys which are here, and if you want to read a little bit about the story of a girls in Korea who try to make up in the corporate world, it's quite well done. And it's not too thick, so it's easy.
Oh, not too thick, I like that. Maybe we can use it for our book club when we start one. Thanks, Pierre. And Preeti, thanks for your, the book too. Is it Adam Grant's, is it? Give and take for your...
There are two books. One is for the cultural awareness, which is known as cultural mapping. So it will be really helpful for the cultural journey. The second, to understand better on enabler, doer, and giver, Adam Grant's Give and Take. So these are two books that I will really strongly recommend. It has been really interesting. I have been part of this book club for IND initiatives, and this was really helpful for my own journey.
Thanks, Preeti. Thank you very much. We will include it in our book club. And with that, thank you, panelists, for taking part in this International Women's Day discussion, creating opportunities for women in the pharma industry. Now we have Harshita to close the discussion with an announcement too, right, Harshita?
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Julia, for leading the discussion, and all the panelists for all your thoughts and your sharing your rich experiences, as well as all the participants who gave really good questions and all their thoughts. Also, we have this other session coming up on the May 19th, which is on achieving improved work-life balance. So you guys are all the more welcome to join us on that session as well. Yep.
Thank you.
So with that, I think we can close off the discussion for today. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
So much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.